And you are live.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Nadia Baena. I am a field representative with Assemblymember Robert Garcia. Unfortunately, due to unforeseen medical circumstances, the assembly member is not able to join. However, he does send his best regards and thanks you all for joining us today. We hope to have a good and informational program with you all. First off, we'd like to thank the San Bernardino Community Service Center for joining us today and leading the presentation. We would also like to thank them for their efforts of advocating and um, supporting the undocumented community, especially during these troubling times. On behalf of the Assembly member, he would like to reaffirm his support for our undocumented community and hopes that we can take the information we learn here today and share it amongst our community, especially our undocumented community. As you may all be aware, over the past few months, we have seen immigration authorities terrorize our communities and their inhumane treatment once those folks are in their control. In California, at the state level, both the Assembly and the Senate chambers have committed to protecting our undocumented community and their family by drafting several legislations, which the governor has now signed into law. A few of these bills we'd like to highlight are AB 49, which offers protection for our students by prohibiting school officials and employees from allowing an immigration officer to enter the school unless they provide the school with valid identification or a valid judicial warrant. AB 1261, which requires the state to provide legal representation for undocumented, unaccompanied minors in federal immigration proceedings, and SB 627, which makes it a crime for law enforcement to wear a facial covering in the performance of their duties, except as specified, and requires any law enforcement agency operating in California to maintain and publicly post a written policy limiting the use of facial coverings as specified. All of these bills, the Assembly member has supported. He has also co-authored a few of them. If you would like more information on the bills, please feel free to send me an email. In the district, the Assembly member's office has worked with local immigration groups such as IC4IJ, CHILA, and of course the San Bernardino Community Service Center to advocate and assist when needed. And we have also attended other presentations by organizations such as the Department of Justice and the San Bernardino County Superintendent of Schools to learn how immigration enforcements are affecting different fields and how we can advocate at the state level. Today, we are partnering with the San Bernardino Community Service Center. They are a community-based nonprofit organization that since 2001 has specialized in providing application assistance, legal representation, and educational information in immigration matters to low-income families in the Inland Empire. The United States Department recognizes them and has accredited representatives and attorneys who represent in immigration matters before various agencies of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Their vision is to be accessible to those in need by creating comprehensive, integrated, and culturally competent services. Don Emilio has led the San Bernardino Community Service Center team since its beginning. He has been an advocate for immigrants' rights in the Inland Empire since 1987. It is a privilege to work alongside the San Bernardino Community Service team as they continue their hard work in advocating and fighting for immigrants' rights. San Bernardino Community Service Center and Don Emilio, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm handing it over so you can do the presentation.
Thank you. We want to welcome everybody to the presentation and obviously express our appreciation to the office of Assemblymember Garcia for putting this together, and obviously to Nadia, Gabriel, and Daisy. And in this time, I think the best way to defend our rights is by knowing our rights. Having a really good understanding of our constitutional rights. So that's basically today's idea, is to go over our constitutional rights and answer questions that you may have. So I'll pass it on to Well, before I do that, um, we like Nadia was saying, we provide different immigration services to residents of San Bernardino, Riverside, and Inyo counties. And our mission is basically to uplift, the lives of immigrant families by providing, empower our community by providing legal assistance, legal services. You want to the next, Cassandra? Okay, that's our team. There's about 20 people, here serving our immigrant community. We're based out of San Bernardino, but we go anywhere where our services are needed. We do presentations to, in the community on a regular basis. We can go to churches, we can go to schools, we can go to any place where the information may be needed. And these are the services that we provide. We provide assistance with family-based petitions, adjustment of status. We do citizenship, DACA renewals, asylum, UT visas, VAWA cases, visas juveniles or CICHES cases for unaccompanied children, TPAs. We also do removal defense, education and outreach, advocacy, and community building, and obviously community empower. Today, we are also joined by our staff attorney, Russell Jauregui, and our civic engagement coordinator, Cassandra Solis. So I'll pass it on to Russell Jauregui to start the presentation on our constitutional rights. Thank you.
Okay, everyone. So we're going to review your Know Your Rights, and I will, to help it make sense, I'll give you examples as we go along the way. Okay, go ahead and move up, Cassandra. Thank you. Okay, so first of all, priorities. The basic idea now is everyone is a priority. Okay. In the previous Biden administration, you were not a priority for removal or arrest or detention, so long as you did not have any criminal history and you did not have a prior removal order prior to the date November 2020. Now, because of the realities of elections and who's in power, under the Trump administration, everyone is basically now a priority. As you've been seeing, I'm sure, through the TV news and all your social media. So anyone who's undocumented, anyone with a criminal record or arrest, anyone who has a prior removal order, anyone who's been previously removed from the United States, that means that you went to immigration court and a judge ordered you removed, and you were in fact, you did return to your country of origin, to Mexico or El Salvador or any other country, and you pose a threat to the national security or public safety or border security. But the reality is, we usually are seeing people now who are just undocumented because they've already picked up people that have the criminal histories, and they've already picked up people that have the final orders of removal. So now basically they're picking on everyone. And the problem when this happens, they get, well, we'll talk about this more, but they get into racial profiling because now we've even seen U.S. citizens being picked up. Okay, Cassandra. Next one. Okay, the Lincoln Riley Act. This was passed right after Trump got elected. This was in response to basically a lot, I think, of misinformation and campaigning that all immigrants are criminals. So now, anyone in the United States, excuse me, anyone who is an immigrant or undocumented, who is unlawfully present in the United States, who has been or does not possess the proper documents to be in the United States, who's applying for immigration benefit or admission into the U.S., if they've been charged with or arrested, not just convicted, but charged with or even arrested for any kind of theft, any kind of burglary, any kind of larceny, any kind of shoplifting offense. So basically, the idea is anyone that has arrived in the United States without status or is in the United States without status, okay, and or is applying for some type of benefit, and if it's found out, it's discovered that you have either an arrest or a citation or and a conviction for any kind of theft-related offense, you will be detained and you will not be released from immigration customs and enforcement detention. Okay, so the tragedy here is in the past, something as minor as a petty theft, which is usually you can deal with that with a fine, or even sometimes a good criminal defense lawyer will work out some type of plea where you can complete a program and just walk away with a dismissal. Now, with just an arrest for a simple shoplifting, and if you're undocumented or if you're in the United States without presence, and ICE knows about this, then they will detain you and you will not be released. You must fight your case while you stay in immigration detention. And that's basically the Lincoln Riley Act. And they can also try to deport you for this also. Okay, go ahead. Okay, versus Perdomo versus Noam. Okay, this is I would call this a very well. It was a huge disappointment because of what you're seeing in the news, because of what you're seeing on social media with all the raids that are going on and people being picked up at car washes, Home Depots, people that are selling fruit, the panaderas. Uh, the Just arresting anyone or anybody who looks brown, including U.S. citizens. There was a lawsuit filed by immigrant rights groups here in California in the Central District, which includes L.A., San Bernardino, Orange, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties. Basically saying that all these roving patrols were basically engaging in racial profiling and stopping people because of just who they look like and where they worked and what kind of clothes they wore. And so we got a very good ruling out of a federal judge in July that basically enjoined uh, these these uh, 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 these roving racial profiling patrols. Okay, and so what the judge was very specific that they could not detain anyone based on their race or ethnicity, speaking Spanish, or speaking English with an accent, or presence in a particular place, or the type of work that a person does. And so what the judge says, you cannot stop people based on those individual factors, okay, or in combination. So we thought we had a very good ruling. And in fact, when this case did come down with her ruling, it did kind of stop the roving patrols that we've been seeing all over Southern California and also like in Chicago now, basically all over the nation. Unfortunately, what the Trump administration did was they filed an emergency petition to the U.S. Supreme Court to enjoin, excuse me, to stop, okay, or to lift the injunction, excuse me, to lift the injunction so that these practices the INS and Border Patrol could still engage in roving patrols and racial profiling roving patrols while this litigation is being pursued. So unfortunately, without a hearing, um, on what they call an emergency docket. The Supreme Court said they agreed with the Trump administration to lift the injunction. Okay, so by doing that, now unfortunately, ICE and the Border Patrol, mostly ICE and Border Patrol, can now continue with these types of racial profiling roving patrols, and that's really a tragedy because we thought we had a very good ruling and now it's just been lifted, okay? And so now you see that they still continue to terrorize people by just engaging in these roving patrols where they just basically pick people up who look Latino or look like they're a day laborer or a worker, and they speak Spanish and they happen to be at a Home Depot or at a work site. So unfortunately, until this litigation is finished, those practices are going to continue. So we just have to wait and see how this case is going to turn out. But unfortunately, this means that we're stuck with these racial profiling and roving patrols for now. Okay, okay, Cassandra, go ahead. Bail eligibility. Okay, this is another big disappointment. When an undocumented person is picked up here in the United States and they're detained, they do have a right, well, they did have a right to be released on bond. Okay, so just think about it. If you watch like a criminal show or know something about criminal law, you'll see that people get released on bail. Well, it's the same concept in immigration court, except we call it bond. Um, and so that is the law, basically, that anyone who is in the United States and they're detained by ICE, okay, they do have the right to a bond hearing Those that cannot get a bond hearing are those people with serious criminal histories. Those basically the test is you have to show that you're not a flight risk and you're not a danger to the community. So most people that have been here a long time, they don't have a criminal history and they're not a flight risk because they have family ties here. They have kids, U.S. citizen children, they have homes, they've been working here. So the great majority of them, if they're stopped and detained, would have a chance at a bond hearing. Well, what happened was the Trump administration again instructed their Department of Homeland Security attorneys to take what we believe is an unlawful interpretation of the bond law. Okay, because what they said is that people who are just arrived at the border, okay, who are just recent arrivals, they can be detained under the law. Okay. And so, but those people that have been here a long time, they're not recent arrivals. Okay, they're not recent arrivals, but the Department of Homeland Security or ICE lawyers, their position now is anyone who is in the United States, no, regardless of how long you've been here, they're treating them as arriving aliens. In other words, that they cannot be released on bond. Okay, so the tragedy is right now you have people sitting in the Adelanto Detention Center, which is a private run facility. It's based on profit, and where there have been a lot of problems with the conditions of people that are there, health conditions, improper food, because it's crowded, because now they have so many people there. Well, all those people there who have been there a long time are not eligible for a bond. The footnote to this is there has been also litigation filed on this issue, okay, and hopefully this Friday we're waiting for a ruling from the court on this particular case. And what we're hoping for is that the court does find that these people that have been here a long time are going to be eligible the court finds them eligible for a bond hearing. There's a similar case in the Northwest that had the same facts, okay, and that court did find that it was unlawful to not allow people to have a bond hearing, and so now in the cases up in the Pacific Northwest, they are getting bond hearings, and so we're hoping that the same will happen here. And this court case does apply to the Central District, which once again includes San Bernardino County, Riverside County, LA County, Orange County, Ventura County, Santa Barbara County, and another county I forgot. Okay, that's bond. Okay, go ahead, Kirsten. Okay, SB 627, that was mentioned before. That's a new state law, okay, that basically says that any law enforcement officials cannot conceal themselves with masks, okay? And that's the problem we've been having is that when people see all these ICE agents or Border Patrol people are wearing masks, and so when people see them, obviously they get scared. They're terrorized, okay? They usually have sunglasses on and wear a mask, okay? And so it's caused a lot of people terror, okay, when you see it, and also you can't identify who's arresting you, okay? So there was a law passed recently signed by the governor called SB 627, which will make that illegal. However, this law does not take effect until January of 2026, okay? But however, it's a good law. So hopefully after January 2026, hopefully they'll comply. I mean, they being ICE and the Border Patrol. SB 627. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Cassandra. Okay, next one is SB 635. Okay, this is called the Street Vendor Protection Act. As you all know, we have a lot of vendors here in San Bernardino County. You see them, on the sidewalks. You see them basically near some shopping centers where there's usually a lot of Latino traffic. There are some existing state laws that do protect them. Okay. However, what SB 6035 does, it protects their information. But it says it protects street vendors from federal immigration enforcement by barring local jurisdictions, such as from collecting sensitive information like their immigration status and their fingerprints, so that ICE will not have access to that information. Okay, because what's going on now is that yes, if they go in and they do apply for a license, if they turn over their place, their location of where they were born, or they admit where they were born, that is information that ICE can use against them. So the purpose of this law, it's a good one, is to protect them and have that information not be shared with ICE or Border Patrol. So once again, SB 635 is a good law. Okay, expedited removal. Okay. What expedited removal means, it is the government's ability to deport someone without due process. In other words, if a person just arrived here, they can be removed, okay, without a hearing. Or if they show up at the border, okay, and they don't have a proper documents to enter, or they make a false claim, they can be subject to expedited removal. But for our conversation tonight, what we are talking about is once a person entered the United States, are they going to be subject to expedited removal? Now, what the Trump administration did is they enhanced this law, because it is a law, to include anybody that's been here less than 2 years nationwide. Okay, but there was litigation on that. Okay, and so the current law is what you see on your screen. Now applies to people that have been here only for 14 days within 100 miles of the border. So we went back to what it was before because of litigation. Okay, so that litigation is in place. Okay, so the current law is for expedited removal is that anyone within 100 miles of the border who recently entered within 14 days, they are subject to expedited removal. Okay, so we're not following the 2-year rule right now because that was litigated, and right now that's been enjoined, and so right now we do have the rule that is anyone who has entered the United States within 14 days, within 100 miles of the border, is subject to expedited removal. Okay, so right now that's good news, and hopefully that litigation will hold for a while. Okay, go ahead. Okay, arrest operations. Okay, this is what used to occur. ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, which is the entity that is charged with um, investigating and arresting undocumented folks in the United States, used to operate this way. In other words, they would get information from arrests or people that had prior deportations, and they would then go actually looking for these people either at their homes or at where they worked, or they would stake out and watch and wait for them. Okay, those are called detention and arrest operations. That's how it used to be, but unfortunately, it's not that way anymore. Okay, go ahead, Cassandra. Okay, raids. This is our current reality. This is what we see on a day-to-day basis. Raids. Okay. Raids are immigration operations that are primarily by the Border Patrol. And the reality is that the Border Patrol just recently now is the lead agency regarding all interior enforcement. Okay. It was ICE, but the Border Patrol has been more aggressive. They have been brutal. They have used, in Chicago, they've used helicopters to arrive at apartments. They have used tear gas, okay, whenever there is people who are trying to demonstrate against them. In other words, this is what Trump likes. He likes what the Border Patrol does, so now they're in charge. And usually they do raids. Okay, so this is, for example, for right now, we see raids occurring at car washes where they show up without a warrant and just start arresting everybody. They start picking people up. This happens at fields. It happens at Home Depots. It happens on corners. Okay, and so these are basically raids. Okay, and the problem with these raids is this is where they violate basically Fourth Amendment and Fifth Amendment laws about, reasonable suspicion and probable cause. But this is the reality that we have now. Okay, we have basically raids or what we call roving patrols, which are basically raids because they're picking any and everybody up. Okay, without concern of reasonable suspicion or probable cause. And again, when you start picking people up who look brown, you pick up U.S. citizens. And to our knowledge, so far, and it's probably undercounted, there's been at least 180 citizens who have been arrested during these raids and roving patrols. Okay, Cassandra. Checkpoints. Okay, this is what you see. For example, if you go to San Diego, if you take the 15, you go towards San Diego and Temecula, you'll see a checkpoint. Okay, if you go to San Diego and you're going south, okay, you'll see a checkpoint in San Clemente. Okay, they also have them if you are in Coachella. Like I was last week, you go. I was up for a hearing. I had to cross through Coachella and drive to Imperial, and I had to pass the checkpoint on the 111. Okay. So in the past, these checkpoints weren't an issue, but they are now because now they are operating. Okay. And so the problem with a checkpoint is the functional equivalent of the border. Okay. So for example, if you're coming from Tijuana into the United States, you have to press, the port of entry. Okay. And you have less rights at the port of entry because there they can't stop your car. They can't ask you for identification. They can't ask you about your status. So the same thing holds with a checkpoint. It's the functional equivalent of the border, so they can stop cars. They can ask questions of everybody in the car and what your status is. For example, when I did this removal hearing last week, the judge did not make a final ruling. So I reminded her, can I please have something that says this case is going to be continued to December the 4th? Because when we go back, my client has to cross the checkpoint and he has to show them something so he will not be detained. Okay. And so, but it is really sad now because you have, for example, I spoke at a college, I forgot how long it was, but I had a student ask me that, well, my undocumented parent is really sick, but he goes for his treatments at UC San Diego, where they have a medical school for free. And I had to tell him that, well, it's a huge risk now because if you take your dad and he's undocumented, yeah, you can go there, but once you come back and the checkpoint's probably going to be up, if they ask your dad what his status is, they're going to detain him. So it's a huge, and I'm really sorry to say that because then there's a lot of student groups that I work with called Puente, and they do like, they work with like high school kids to get them to go to college, what they call transfer programs. And they have field trips to San Diego, UC San Diego. Well, I told them now you you can't take undocumented children because if they stop the bus and they will arrest these children. So that checkpoints now are an issue. You have to be really careful. If you have DACA, I would still not go through a checkpoint. Okay, Cassandra, because of the risk involved now. Go ahead, Cassandra. DHS agencies, okay, Custom and Border Patrol, we just spoke about them. They are usually at the border. Okay, so again, if you go into Tijuana or to Mexico and you're driving, you're coming back in, or even walking in, you have to pass a checkpoint with Customs and Border Patrol. But now they are in the interior, okay, and now they are in charge. And so the problem is they're not made for the interior, okay? They're made for the border. In other words, they're made for arresting people who are, say, drug smugglers or who are smuggling folks, okay? That's the kind of mindset that they have, okay? It's about arrest, arrest, arrest. And they're not used to dealing with, the urban areas, okay, or crowd control, specifically crowd control. They're not like regular police. If there's a demonstration, how to deal with crowd control. Regular police know how to do that. We work with them all the time. Border Patrol, they have no clue. They just start throwing a tear gas, shooting people with, what do they call it? They're some kind of projectile, right? That's how they react because they don't know how to deal with crowd control. Immigration Customs Enforcement, usually those are the ones that are in the interior. Okay, those are the urban areas. They take care of the urban areas. That's the agency that is charged with investigating, arresting, and starting a deportation process against undocumented folks in the United States. Okay, but unfortunately, because of the Trump administration, they now have combined efforts, to do these ICE enforcement, these enforcements in the interior. And now it's basically Border Patrol is going to take the lead, and that's dangerous for the reasons I just stated. There is also UCIS. Okay, well, this is another tragedy. UCIS is when in 2001, after 9/11, when the Department of Homeland Security was envisioned and incorporated. UCI, the idea was to have ICE and Border Patrol over here and UCIS over here because UCIS should be different and separate because it's the adjudicating agency. For example, if you apply for DACA, if you apply for a family-based petition, okay, and then later on want to if you're trying to adjust like a family member, like your wife or your son or your parent, or you're filing for all the applications that we do here, like U visas, crime victims, or victims of domestic violence, or even like the CIGIS petitions, those when they have a interview on their adjustment of status application to become a permanent resident, UCIS does that. And so the idea was to keep them separate. They're a benefit agency. Not anymore. Under the Trump administration, every agency now under the Trump administration has been weaponized to become a tool for enforcement. Okay? So now they have just approved policy that they will now have armed agents at UCIS. If you apply for a benefit and your spouse or your significant other has no status, there is a chance that they can be detained and they will be put in removal proceedings. Okay. In the past, if you were trying to adjust someone's status and they're undocumented, they just let it slide because they knew they were going to adjust. Well, now if they're undocumented, there's a risk that they will be detained. And if you have any kind of issue, then you will be detained. So unfortunately, UCIS has now been weaponized, and it's now part of the enforcement apparatus. And so now here in this office, we have to be very careful about the applications we do go forward with, because of course we don't want people to be detained or arrested. Okay, so go ahead, Cassandra. Other law enforcement agencies, FBI, okay, that's the investigates like criminal activities, terrorism, cybercrime, white-collar crimes, public corruption. But the issue here is the FBI now has also, by the Trump administration, they've also been incorporated into the immigration enforcement apparatus. So many times when you see these acts here in the U.S., okay, and there's like a raid at a house, even at a house, or at an apartment, you see agents from ICE, Border Patrol, FBI, and there's an agency called the Arms, Tobacco, and Firearms. They've also been part of these ICE operations. In fact, the next one you see is Homeland Security Investigations. They conduct like criminal investigators into like, trafficking, contraband, weapons, sensitive technology. But they also now have been incorporated into this enforcement apparatus. So you have all these agencies, which is really not necessary, by the way. It's really a waste of time and money because all you need is basically ICE. That's it. Okay. But it's like Trump wants to show this is basically a muscle operation. Okay. And he's looking for press. He's looking for TV coverage. Okay. So they have all these people involved in one operation, which is not necessary. In fact, there have been agents at the FBI complaining, saying, "Look, this is a waste of our time. We should be chasing real criminals, not these unfortunate undocumented folks." Okay, U.S. Marshal Service, that's basically people, for example, if you go to court, okay, and you see people there watching over the court, or you see people bringing in federal detainees, that's the U.S. Marshals, okay? They work in apprehending federal fugitives, managing seized assets through criminal activities, housing and transporting federal prisoners. And so usually you see them in criminal court, federal criminal court. When you see people being brought in to the court, they're usually brought in by the U.S. Marshals. They have not been part of ICE's or enforcement apparatus yet. Okay, go ahead, Cassandra. Okay, immigration authorities. Okay, this is something we do really in the community so people can hopefully get an idea of what ICE vehicles look like or what they don't look like. Um, in the right hand in the left hand corner, you'll see a CBP vehicle, a CBP vehicle. That's what a Border Patrol vehicle used to look like. That's what it used to look like. Okay, and then the Homeland Security investigative vehicle, you see on top, that's what they used to look like. However, in these operations, that's not what they look like. Okay, they look like the car you see at the bottom, unmarked, with tinted windows, no license plate, or if they have a license plate, it revolves. Okay, so, and all you have is just flashing lights. Okay, so if you, see something like this in front of your house, you don't know who it is. Okay, and so people get scared. Okay, you don't know who it is. Okay, and that's by design. Okay, I think this whole thing is to instill terror in our communities, and that's what they do. Now they show them unmarked cars, okay, with tinted windows, all right, with no identifiers, okay, and just the only time they identify themselves is when they turn on their flashing lights. Okay, go ahead, because on the next one. Thanks. Okay, okay, so same thing here. When you see ICE vehicle, that's what they used to look like, but that's not what they look like now. Okay. Again, what you see is unmarked sedans, tinted windows, usually white or black. Okay. Or it could be now any kind of other vehicle that's not marked. Okay. Usually tinted windows without license plates, or they have revolving license plates. And that's been an issue like in Chicago because they got sharp in Chicago, said, look, it's illegal for people to be driving around with license plates that revolve. So, yeah, they've actually tagged a couple of ICE officers in Chicago for that. Okay, but the point is they now use unmarked cars with tinted windows. Okay, go ahead, Chris, on the next one. Okay. Okay, same principle here. What you see on top is a CBP, Customs Border Patrol. You see ICE. Okay, and you see ICE, HSI. That's what they used to look like, but they don't look like that now. They look like what you see below. Plain clothes, masked, dark sunglasses, okay, or you see them like to the hilt, like this boy guy on the right, dressed for war. Okay, and that's how times they look sometimes at a raid. In fact, in Chicago, that's how they look. They walk down downtown Chicago looking like the guy on the like, right. That was just for show. That was just for show. Again, that's instilling terror. Okay, and they had a speedboat with guys who look like that go down the Michigan River in Chicago. That's ridiculous. Okay, that's no need to do that. Okay, that's not what this country's about. Okay, but that's what we're dealing with now. Okay, and that's what our people deal with now on a daily basis. They see people with a mask, dark sunglasses. You can hardly read where they're from. Okay, you don't know what agency they're from. Okay, no name tags, nothing. Okay, and that just causes terror in our community. Okay, okay, Cassandra. Next one. Okay, so you see the difference between ICE, what they look like now, and what regular law enforcement looks like? Because at least with these agencies here, the Highway Patrol, the police, even the local sheriffs, you know what they look like. Okay, they don't wear masks. Okay, there you can identify them. They have their badge on. They have a thing that has their name. Okay, you know who you're dealing with. Okay, and you can see by the cars who they are. Okay, so that's a big difference between them and ICE. And ICE, it's all about, terror. It's all about hiding who they are. It's about hiding their identification. But that's the reality that we're dealing with right now. Okay, go ahead, Cassandra. Thanks. Okay, non-immigration enforcement vehicles. We show this to the community so at least people, if they see a U.S. Department of Agricultural, okay, if they see a community emergency response, if they see one of these vehicles, hopefully they can see it's not ICE. I mean, I'll give you a good example, but it's still you just right now people are so full of terror. You're on your guard. I mean, the other day I was jogging down where I jog, and I saw a car, and I go, "Oh crap, it's ICE." Well, it wasn't. It was the Ontario Enforcement Code, but it looked like ICE. But you see what I'm getting at? If I feel that way, imagine how someone who's undocumented feels. Okay. All right, go ahead, Cassandra. Okay, your constitutional rights. Okay, so let's go over these. The basic idea here is that every person in the United States, with or without status, regardless of your immigration status, you have basic constitutional rights. That's the thing that's missing in today's debate. The Fourth Amendment basically it protects every person in the United States from what they call unlawful searches and seizures in your home, in your person. Okay. So basically, it protects you from unlawful searches and seizures from your home and on your person. Okay, your place of business. Okay, the Fifth Amendment ensures that you cannot be a witness against yourself. In other words, you cannot testify against yourself. Okay, and you cannot be deprived of life or liberty without due process of law. Life or liberty without you cannot be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process. Those are the basic ideas. So we'll give you some examples how this works with immigration enforcement. Okay, Cassandra, go ahead. Okay, so contact with immigration. This is really the same idea as it is with regular law enforcement. Uh, uh, Usually the law enforcement, like this is on like a casual, like you're just on the street. If a law enforcement comes up to a person and says, "Can I speak to you?" and the person has a right to say, "Am I being detained?" If the officer says no, then you're free to leave. Okay? You're free to leave. Okay? If they says you're not, this is not, we're not, this is not, you're not being detained, we just want to speak, then you can say, "Am I being detained? I am free to leave." That's basically the rule for casual interrogation. It's also the same with undocumented folks. Same rule. Detention can only occur with what's called reasonable suspicion. Um, and so, and this is also true of undocumented folks. And so the basic thing to remember here is that there are basically the United States Supreme Court and even the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. These are appellate courts that all immigration agencies and all immigration courts have to follow. They have all said that Latino appearance is not enough to detain someone for immigration purposes. Okay. Arrest is when, okay, let's say you do have reasonable suspicion, and uh, then you have what's called probable cause. Okay, the basic example there is if an undocumented person runs, okay, then a Border Patrol officer or ICE officer, okay, I now have probable cause to arrest this person. I have reasonable suspicion and probable cause because they're running, okay? They're running from me, so that gives me reasonable suspicion and probable cause to arrest. That's basically how it works. Go ahead. Okay, so reasonable suspicion again is conduct that would lead an officer to conclude, in light of their experience, that this person is violating the law. Okay, so it's like behavior of the person, geographic location, or a complaint. Okay, probable cause, once again, is the fact and circumstances lead a person, the officer, to believe that they have enough now to make an arrest. Like their example is fleeing, suspicious movements, real evidence. Like, for example, do they have a criminal conviction? Do they have a prior deportation in their records? Okay, do they have the actual deportation? Do they have the actual conviction documents? Okay. Um, if they go up to a person, and this is where the person has to know their rights, if they ask a person, "Where are you born? How did you get in the U.S.?" The undocumented person has a right to say, "I refuse to answer that question, and I want to speak to a lawyer." They have the right to remain silent. If they ask the person and the person says, "I don't have any documents, I was born in Mexico," then that is evidence of their unlawful status. That's enough probable cause. Okay. Now, the way that works in real life, I'll give you an example from one of the cases we have. We had a gentleman who has a work permit, by the way. He had a work permit, and he was a gardener, and he went to a Home Depot on Hospitality Lane in San Bernardino. Okay. And so then once he left, he went about a couple of blocks, and all of a sudden he sees an unmarked car following him that had their lights on. And then he heard a loud voice through a microphone, "Please pull over, pull over, pull over." And so he was pulled over. And then this masked gentleman came up to him and said, "Do you have a driver's license?" And he said, "Yes, I do have a driver's license." Okay. And then the person came back and said, "Well, may I see some of your IDs?" And so he saw that the gentleman had a matriculio consular. In other words, there was evidence of his that he was a Mexican citizen, but he also had a work permit. Okay. And so basically he was arrested, okay, and detained. Now, so our argument was that they had no reasonable suspicion because basically all they had was a brown gentleman leaving a Home Depot. And in other words, if we still had that case I spoke about further in the beginning about it being unlawful to stop a person based on how they look, what kind of work they do, and even the location, then this would have been illegal. It would have been illegal arrest and stop. Okay. But because of the injunction got lifted, now it's open season. Okay. And again, this person had a work permit, but I still argued regardless that it was unlawful because they had no reasonable suspicion and no probable cause to stop him. Okay, that gives you an idea. Okay, go ahead. Okay, during a raid or operation, okay, basic rule at home. Okay, well, you have a Fourth Amendment right, okay, of a reasonable search and seizure, which means that no law enforcement officer, no local police officer, and nor any ICE agent or Border Patrol cannot enter your home unless they have a warrant. Okay, so if you only get anything out of this presentation, this is probably the most important one. Okay, because if an undocumented person opens the door or consents to them coming in, if there's other undocumented folks inside the house, they're going to start arresting everybody. Okay, so the basic rule is that the undocumented folks have any person has the right not to open their door if law enforcement asks, if they say we want to get in your house, or they say that it's in your house, or you just want to talk to you, you have to keep the door closed, okay? Because once you open it, then that's under the law, that's consent. Okay, now this Fourth Amendment rule also, okay, it's not on here, but it also applies to the curtilage in your yard, okay? Because of a case filed here in Southern California, it's called the Kidd case, okay? And that case arose because, okay, so because a lot of ICE agents and Border Patrol, they know people know their rights. Okay, they know it. They know people have been schooled or educated not to open the door. So what they would tell people is, well, can you just step outside because I want to talk to you about someone else, or I want to talk to you about a code violation, or I want to talk to you about a ticket you have. So in other words, they would trick people to get out of the house, and then they would arrest them. Okay, and so that case, those cases went to litigation here in Southern California, and so now ICE agents and Border Patrol also have to have a warrant to get into a yard or your curtilage. Okay, especially if you have a gate. Okay, in other words, you have to have a warrant to get into the yard, and they have to have a warrant to get in through your door. You have to have warrants for two. Okay, all right. Okay, keep silent again. People have to remain silent. I'll give you an example. I just spoke to this poor panadera, this lady who was selling fruit. She was approached by Border Patrol, and the first thing they asked her is, "Do you have papers?" And she said, "No." And that's it. Okay. She probably didn't know her rights. Okay. If she would have said, "No, I wish to speak to an attorney first," if she would have just said, "Remain silent," maybe this would have turned out differently. Okay. But undocumented folks do have the right to remain silent. Okay. Do not sign anything. Do not sign anything because, like people like her, who doesn't speak English, who doesn't speak Spanish, who doesn't even read Spanish. Okay, if she signs something, she may be signing away her rights. Like she may be signing something that says, "I agree to take a voluntary departure," or "I agree to be deported before I see a judge." Okay, because those forms exist. Okay, and we tell people to call your lawyers, okay, your community-based organization like us, or call your union, or call your church. Also, you can call your consulates. Okay, for example, the Mexican consulate they do have resources. They have their own app that has an application that has people that has Know Your Rights. It tells them how to maybe access attorneys. The consulate does have resources for attorneys. Okay, so we really encourage people to call the Mexican consulate. Now, they can also call if you're Guatemalan, you call it Guatemalan consulate, Salvadoran consulate. They don't have the resources, I think, or the resources and the app the way the Mexican consulate does, but people do have the right to call their consulates, and the consulates can get involved to at least try to locate people where they are in case they found they can't locate them once they're detained. Okay, next one. Do's and don'ts. Okay, once again, if a person's detained, you can give your correct name. Okay, please give your correct name because if you give a false name and once you're detained, we can't find you. Okay, so that's why it's better if you give your correct name because if you give a false name, we're trying to find you, then we can't find you. Okay, if you're detained. Okay, so you can give your name and date of birth. Okay, because once again, you're not admitting any type of alienage. You're not admitting where you're born or where you're from. Okay, do carry proof of your lawful status. If you do have, if you're a lawful permanent resident, you want to carry your what they call the green card. If you're here on parole, you have like an I-94, you want to carry your I-94. If you have a work permit, you want to carry your work authorization card. Okay, you do want to carry proof of your attorney's card or your consulate's information. Okay, do not give false information because if you give false information or present false documents, then you're going to have two problems. Number one, uh, you're going to have an immigration problem in the future because if you admit using false documents to an INS officer or an immigration officer, that can keep you from immigrating in the future. Number two, if you use false documents or give false information, then you can be charged criminally for giving false information to a police officer. So it's not worth it. Just give correct information, okay? Do not state your country of birth because, again, you're admitting your alienage, okay? For the government to begin a deportation case against a person, they must prove that you are from another country. That's called alienage. So you have the right not to admit where you were born or how you came to the United States. You just say, I want to speak to a lawyer. Don't admit that. Okay? Do not admit your unlawful undocumented status like, unfortunately, the lady that was selling fruit did. Okay? Do not carry false documents. Okay. And we also tell people do not carry around your passport or your matrícula consular because even if you don't admit where you're from, and if they do a pat down search, which they can't do if they arrest you, okay, and they discover that you have your matrícula consular, your passport, and your purse in your wallet, that's proof of your alienage. So it's better enough just not carrying that stuff around. I know people use it like for bank accounts and other good things, but you should just keep it at your house and keep it in a safe place. Okay? Okay, Cassandra, next one. Contact with immigration. Okay, once again, don't open the door. Okay, they can only open the door if you give them permission. Okay, ask the officers if they get in, okay, and this is where you're gonna have a problem these days because if they're masked and wear dark sunglasses, if you ask them to identify themselves, they may tell you, no, I don't have to, because you've probably seen it. I've seen it on all the great work that is done by the advocates and all the social media posts they post. There have been ICE agents that identify yourself. I don't have to. Okay, so ask, but these days they may not identify themselves. Okay, which is illegal. Okay, if they have a warrant, you have the right to see it. Okay, and maybe if you have someone that can speak English, make sure it identifies the place to be searched, the person to be searched. Okay, if they have a warrant, ask them to flight it under their door so you don't have to open the door because if the warrant is incorrect, then you don't have to open the door or ask them to place it up against the window so you can see it. Okay. And if they do take things from your home, ask for a receipt of the things they take. At work, okay, ICE cannot enter private places without a warrant. So what we tell employers, okay, and there are signs available. Okay, the Inland Coalition for Immigrant Justice has do not enter signs. Even my own congressperson, Norma Torres, she's going. I've seen businesses with do not enter signs from Norma Torres's office, so she gets it. Okay, she's helping out. Okay, she's distributing do not enter signs to immigrant businesses. Okay, so businesses should have do not enter places that are private. If you don't want people to enter your property, put a do not enter sign because if you have those signs, they can't. ICE has no right to enter. Neither does any law enforcement officer. Okay, and so once again, tell your employees if ICE gets into the public area, okay, of your business, okay, then not to run because once you run, that's reasonable suspicion and probable cause to make an arrest. Okay, next one, Cassandra. Thanks. Okay. Very important. Another thing is if you remember one thing from this presentation, know the difference between a judicial warrant and a DHS warrant. Okay, the judicial warrant on the left is usually from a federal court for immigration purposes. The judicial warrant will say it's from a federal court. Okay, it'll have the address of the place to be searched. It will have the correct name of the person to be searched. It'll have the correct date, okay, and it also lists the things to be searched, and it is signed by a judge, a federal judge, okay? So those things all have to be those are all the elements of a judicial warrant, okay? On the right-hand side, this is a U.S. DHS warrant, okay? So if ICE goes to someone's door and says, look, I have a warrant for the person's arrest, if they show the warrant on the right, that is not a warrant to enter your home. Even though the person who is in the house is the subject of this warrant, you don't open the door, okay? Because that is not sufficient to enter your home, okay? Or even a place of business, okay? That is what they call administrative warrant signed by a DHS officer, okay? So once again, although it says warrant for arrest, it is not legally enforceable to enter a home or even a business, okay? So y'all please know the difference. If you want and if you need, we can probably send you copies so you know the difference, okay? Because this has been basically the game changer for a lot of undocumented folks. They know this. Most undocumented folks know this, okay? And there's been a lot of training done on this, so they know this. And that's why ICE agents are having trouble getting into people's homes, okay? All right, so just know the difference between the warrants. Okay, so because on the next one. Okay, contact with immigration. Okay. ICE can enter they can enter a public place. So, like for example, on the street, walking. Okay, if they're in a restaurant, they can. And that's what the restaurants are difficult because if they go into a restaurant, it's a public area. Okay, so we tell restaurant owners if you have a place where employees go, if you have a place where you have your records, like where the cooking's done, okay, that you need to put signs up saying private. Okay, no entry. Okay. Because they can't enter a public area. For example, if you, oh, I got to talk about something I forgot to talk about. Okay, I'll talk about it in a minute. Okay, once again, don't we tell undocumented folks do not run because then you have reasonable suspicion and probable cause. Okay, never carry false documents. We reviewed that. Again, if it's a casual encounter, just like you would with any police officer, they stop you. Can we talk? Am I being detained? No. Am I free to leave? Yes. Leave. Okay. If they tell you you can't leave, once again, you can give your name and then you have the right to remain silent about where you're, if undocumented folk, where you were born, how you entered the country. You stay quiet, say, I'd rather speak to an attorney because I'll exercise my right to remain silent. Then if that's all they have, they can only arrest you if they have a warrant to do so. Okay. Without an order, they can only detain and arrest you if they have proof that you're undocumented. In other words, if you admit, okay, that your status, if you admit you're here unlawfully. Okay, so next one. Okay, while driving. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna go out on a limb on this one because some advocates say don't okay, well, let me just say. Okay, so if you're driving, okay, first of all, ICE is not supposed to be enforcing speed laws. Okay, so if you're driving, you stay calm and respectful, remain polite, and don't argue with any officer. Um, in the past, we would tell people don't roll down the window, but as you all know, I'm sure you've seen plenty of social media and even on major news networks that ICE is now just breaking windows. Okay? When they break windows, they just pull people out. So there's a danger that people could get really hurt. All right, because they just break windows now. They don't care. They've done it with people holding their child. Okay, that happened just the other day when the person was holding their child. They broke the window and forced the person out when the person was trying to hold their child. They broke the windows of women who are pregnant. So for me, you know what? It's too dangerous now. If the ICE officer comes to your car door to your car window, just roll it down so they don't break the window. But then again, you still have your rights. Okay, you have the right to remain silent. Okay, do not admit your alienage. Okay, if they want to see your driver's license, you can give it to them. Okay, but if they start asking questions where you were born, how'd you in the United States, you have the right to remain silent. You have the right not to consent to a search of your car. Okay, if they say, "Can I search your car?" No, you don't. Can I open up your trunk? No, you don't. No, I'm not consenting. No, no, no. Just like you would with any police officer. Same rules, just like with a police officer. And again, ask if you're free to leave. Am I being questioned? Okay, am I being detained? No, you're not. Okay, can I leave? Yes, take off, leave. Okay. And officers cannot detain you longer than necessary. Okay, so those are the basic rules. But once again, what I'm telling everybody now is my opinion is if ICE approaches you at your car window and they ask you to roll the window down, just roll it down. Remember that you still have your basic rights. Okay, and you probably want to put your hands on your steering wheel so they know that you're not going to hit or try to pull it, which you're not going to do. But so just be mindful, protect yourself. Okay. All right, so okay, go ahead, Cassandra. If you're arrested, okay, do not sign any documents for the reasons we just stated before. You may be signing away your rights to a hearing before an immigration judge, okay, and you could be signing basically agreeing to be deported, okay. Ask to see an immigrant, okay, your rights if you're detained, you have the right to make a phone call, okay. You have the right to ask to see a judge, okay. Again, you have the right to call, if you have an attorney, you have the right to call a community-based organization like ourselves, your family, and also your counselor. Okay, counselors are very good because they can get places that we cannot. For example, lawyers cannot get into Border Patrol stations, but the consulate can get access, okay, because they have what they call diplomatic rights. Okay, so consulates, can be very good, at locating folks that we cannot locate. Okay, and once again, the Mexican consulate does have resources. They have apps that can be very, very helpful. Okay, next one. Okay, removal proceedings. Let me just go through this really quickly. This is what if a person is put in deportation proceedings, this is kind of a schematic how it works. First of all, if you're detained, you want to ask for a bond hearing. Okay, that's usually usually the person has a right to a bond hearing, and hopefully we'll know after Friday if that right is going to be re-invoked, especially at Adelanto, where they now have, I think it's the capacity now. Okay, because they have three locations in Adelanto. I think they're all full. Okay, so the first hearing is called the master calendar hearing. If you're in detention or even if you're in court, if you don't have an attorney, ask for time because they will 100% guarantee they will always give you at least one continuance to find an attorney. If it's an unaccompanied minor, they might give them two or three, maybe four times to try to get a lawyer. Okay, but for a family or an adult, if you don't have a lawyer the first time, ask for time, okay, because they'll give you time to try to find one. Now, just before I go any further, the reality is that unfortunately there is no public defender system in immigration courts, which is a tragedy because I think that immigration courts you have much to lose as you win a criminal case because you're going to be separated, barred from your family forever, okay? It's a lot, but unfortunately, until we change the immigration courts and get them out of the system that we have now, there's no right to a public defender system. Okay, and let me just say what I always say to our staff. The tragedy with immigration courts is they are not really independent courts. They are under the jurisdiction of the Department of Justice. Okay, and so in other words, they're part of the executive branch. And so unfortunately, what has happened is the Trump administration has they fired, I think, close to 100 immigration judges. And because what we found out was the majority of those judges they had fired they had a favorable, in other words, they granted cases about 50+% of the time. Okay. So what they're doing is they're putting in their own people. Okay. And to be quite frank, they have replaced them with military JAG lawyers recently. And they've replaced them with people that have no experience in immigration law. So once again, I think you know where I'm getting with this is this administration, they're trying to weaponize the immigration courts to become enforcement, to become tools of enforcement. That's just the reality we have. Okay, now I'll go on. Okay, so master calendars is when the government presents something called a notice to appear. Think of a complaint in criminal court. The notice to appear has the charges against you. It usually says that you are a native and citizen. You're not a native or citizen of the United States. You're a native and citizen of Mexico, Guatemala. You entered the United States at some unknown location at some unknown time, and you came in without status. Okay? Or it could say you are a legal permanent resident, but you were convicted on this date of such particular crime, and therefore you are deportable. Okay? And so they serve you that at the initial master calendar. Then you have the right to either concede the charges, and what you do, admit the charges, admit the allegations and concede the charge, or you can contest them. Okay, you can say, no, I'm not admitting any allegations, and I'm not contesting any charge. I want to contest deportability. Okay, so you have the two options. Okay. And then if you admit the allegations, you concede the charge, then the judge will ask you what your relief is. For the last 2 years, we've been doing a lot of political asylum cases for those people that are recent arrivals, or we did a lot of work with unaccompanied minors who came here by themselves. And I personally like doing those cases because we dealt with children and they had a chance. Because if you're a minor and you came in unaccompanied, then you have the right to apply for something called the Special Immigrant Juvenile Petition. But that is it's not an easy process because you're dealing with two court systems. You're dealing with immigration courts and the state courts because what an unaccompanied minor has to do, they have to go into state court, either to a family court or a guardianship court, for a judge to make a judicial finding that it's not in their best interest to be reunited with one or both of their parents, and it's not in their best interest to return to their home country. So once you get those two findings, though, in a state court, then you can use those to apply for the Special Immigrant Juvenile Petition, and they're put on a path to permanent residency. Okay, and so during the Biden administration, it was working for us. Many of these children's cases had moved, most of their were just dismissed. Once the judge knew that, also, if you're a minor, okay, your asylum application is treated differently because it's not adjudicated by the immigration court, it's adjudicated by the asylum office. Okay, and so if you're a minor and if you come an unaccompanied minor and you file with the asylum office, you can get your case dismissed in immigration court because your asylum application is adjudicated with the asylum office. Okay, so you have basically more rights. Okay, but when kids come with their parents, they're not unaccompanied, and that's where it gets more difficult. Okay. Okay, so then, or there's another application. There's another. You can apply for, if you're an adult, you can apply for a political asylum. You can apply for a defense called cancellation removal, which we'll talk about in a minute. If you lose, okay, in the immigration court, then you can't. Okay, then once you file your application for relief, like your asylum application or your cancellation application, then you have what's called an individual hearing. You put witnesses on. For example, if you have an asylum case, you will testify as to why you are afraid to go back. You will have country conditions and hopefully evidence from witnesses of how you were mistreated or if you were beaten by someone or if you have hospital records, you put on your evidence. Okay, that's for an asylum case. For something called cancellation removal, that's based on your time here and family ties. You want to have proof of your evidence of your family ties and the evidence of the time you've been here. If the case is approved on an asylum case, then you win your case and then you'll be put on the path to permanent residency. The same thing with the cancellation case, it just takes a little longer. If it's denied, then you have the right to appeal to the Board of Immigration Appeals, okay, which is called the BIA. Same reality, same criticism that I said before. The BIA is not an independent court. Okay, it is under the Department of Justice. Okay, in other words, part of the executive branch. Same thing here. Trump has fired most of the Board of Immigration appellate judges. I believe now there's only 13. Okay, and once again, and the BIA now is making decisions. Actually, we just had a staff meeting today over this, narrowing people's ability to apply for asylum. In other words, it's becoming an enforcement tool, unfortunately. Okay, and in the past, if you wanted to appeal, there's a form involved that you have to file. Up for the last 30 or 50 years, if you wanted to appeal, it only cost you $110. Now, under the Trump administration, that form is now $1,010. And so again, I think you see the pattern here is to make it so hard, so expensive that people just want to give up. Okay. Now, if you lose at the BIA level, then you have the right to go into a real court, which is the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And that's all I can say is that way you're dealing with real judges, a real court, and a lot of precedent dealing with immigration law and asylum law is at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Okay. So that's basically how removal proceedings work. Okay, next one, Cassandra. Okay, like I said before, you can deny, once you get the charging document, you can deny the allegation. In other words, you could deny that you are a native and citizen of Mexico, a native and citizen of Guatemala or Mexico. You can deny that you entered at an unlocation. You can deny that I entered unlawfully. Okay. And then you can also deny the charge. The charge usually says that you entered without status or don't have proper documents. You can deny all those, okay, and then put the burden on the government because it is the government's burden to prove that a person is here without status. It's their burden to prove it. Okay, that's what the good thing about doing contested hearings. Okay, just to give you the example again, in the case I was mentioning earlier, the gentleman that was coming out of Home Depot. Okay, so we argued that his stop was unlawful. Okay, and that they had no probable cause, and so therefore his arrest was unlawful. Okay, and that thus the case should just be dismissed. You can just in other words, you cannot go forward in the charges because these are unlawful stops. Okay, so you can't use this charge because this was an unlawful stop. Okay. And so it was a motion to have the case just terminated because it's an unlawful arrest. Okay. In the past, okay, when I did these in the past when I was in private practice, I would actually get a hearing on this, and sometimes they have to call the officer to testify. Now, judges this one was just a 4-sentence denial. It was not an improper. It was not. Unlawful arrest was not, but it was basically the judge was like very perfunctory, like 4 sentences, that's it, and he denied the motion. Okay, But okay, you still have the right to do this. Okay, and in fact, this is still being done. Okay, like for example, the case I spoke about, the big case in LA regarding the unlawful stops. This is where these cases come in to play. So there's still a very good tool to use, and we're gonna keep using it regardless of who's uh who's president. Go ahead. Okay, cancellation removal is a defense that is more common now. Okay, I said when a couple years ago we were seeing everyone who was recent arrivals. The people that are being picked up now on the streets at these roving patrols, these racially profiling roving patrols, most of the people have been here a long time and they're going to qualify for this relief. For example, the lady that I spoke about who was arrested for selling fruit, she qualifies for this relief because she has been living here for more than 10 years. She has she's a person of good moral character because she has no criminal history. She has no prior history with Immigration Customs Enforcement. Okay. She does have 4 U.S. citizen kids, ages 12, 7, 10, and 2. Okay. And the hard part about this is as you must show hardship to the person. Like for example, she would have to show that her U.S. citizen kids would suffer what's called exceptional and extremely unusual hardships if she is separated from them or if they go with her. Okay, so that's a very high standard to meet. Usually they're looking for like medical problems. If the kids have any medical problems, are they in special ed? And it's a very high bar to reach. Okay, so again, these are very difficult cases to win. Um, and so just to give you an example, we just had a case last week when I went to Imperial on a case out of this office where this gentleman is undocumented, but he is basically the sole caretaker of his mother, okay, who has serious health issues. He's the one that is basically responsible for taking to her doctor's appointments and taking her for her. He helps her with the medications. He also has a wife who's very ill, and he's really the only one who can take care of both. Okay, and so I thought we had a very decent case, but what the judge found was that because the mother is staying with his sister, but his sister, we even had a declaration from his sister said, "Look, I can't take care of my mother because I work. Okay, I work full time. I can't do what my brother does." Okay, and then what she found with his wife was that she has anxiety issues. She's having problems with her foot. And basically, it's mostly anxiety issues. Okay. And she goes, I don't drive because of my anxiety issues. I just don't drive. And sometimes I don't even feel like getting out of bed. Okay. So the judge found that that wasn't her medical conditions were not enough. Okay. To meet that exceptional extreme hardships. And I argued with the judge and said, look, Your Honor, this is a person that's also the emotional ties to her husband. This is the person that she's lived with for like 29 years and raise their kids with. They also had kids who were all adults. They were all adults. One is a therapist. One is studying to be a nurse. One has her own U.S. citizen kids. Very deep roots. And so the judge is going to give me one more chance to write one more brief to see if I can just dissuade her that this person is eligible for should win his cancellation removal case. But again, it's a difficult relief to get. But that's what we have to work with. Okay, Cassandra, next one. Okay, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because, again, this is the Trump administration just making life hell for everyone. Basically, there is a section of the immigration law that states that everyone who's here must register with the government. Okay, but it's never been enforced until the Trump administration. So now, basically, any non-citizen who's the age of 14 or above, or any parent of a minor child who's under the age of 14, when that child turns 14, they must register with the U.S. government, okay? But, okay, what we tell people is talk to an attorney before you make this decision, because if you decide to register, what will happen is that you are basically giving information to the U.S. government, to DH, ICE, Border Patrol, because they're all interacted, okay? UCIS now, as I said, it's become an enforcement tool. They will share this information with ICE and Customs and Border Patrol and ICE, and then they'll come looking for you. They've even admitted it. They said once we get the information, we will come looking for that person to put them in removal proceedings. Okay, So there's, but basically people should talk to an attorney first because there are, again, as I said before, you have the right not to be a witness against yourself. So you may have First, Fifth Amendment rights that you need to talk to a lawyer about. So we just tell people, before you do this, talk to an immigration lawyer or talk to a criminal lawyer first. That's it. Okay, go ahead, Cassandra. Okay, violation of rights. Okay, there have been violation of rights during these racial profiling roving patrols, including you. You saw the basic. You probably saw some of this. There was in the city where I live. There's a veteran. No, city that my sister lives in, Orange. There's a veteran whose father's undocumented, who was a gardener. Uh, and when he was detained in Fountain Valley, he was not only tackled by ICE agents, he was punched and hit while he was on the ground. Okay. You have another example again of pregnant women being not just asked to leave the vehicle, but forced out of their vehicle and forcibly thrown to the ground. Okay, and so some of these, okay, and even this has happened even to U.S. citizens. There was a Marine, I think in Ventura, who showed up. I think they were at a marijuana. It's where they grow marijuana plants. Okay, so ICE did a raid, and this U.S. citizen who's a veteran was just driving there. He was driving to work, but there was ICE they blocked him, and he was just trying to get to work. And so when they were giving him different, they said, some said leave, some said go. And so finally, what they did to him is they broke his window, they dragged him out and held him for 3 days before he could even call anybody. He's a U.S. citizen. Okay. He has filed a lawsuit and he will get damages. Believe me, he's going to get some damages. Okay. So, but with him, to do this, that you need to work with organizations that do this type of work. But yes, people are encouraging people to file these types of lawsuits because that's the only way you're going to keep these rogue agencies, because now they're acting all rogue now, accountable. Okay, Cassandra, the next one. Prepare now. Okay, this is something real simple, but it's also very important, okay? Because people now given what's going on now, people do have to prepare. Okay, if you are a permanent resident, please call our office for an appointment for a consultation to become a U.S. citizen. Because when you become a U.S. citizen, you cannot be deported. If you're a legal permanent resident, you can. Okay, and you just may be like right now, I just explained to you, if you're a legal permanent resident at the wrong place at the wrong time, you did nothing wrong, they can put you in removal proceedings. Okay, so you want to become a U.S. citizen, please call our office if you're a legal permanent resident, so you can get a consultation and good service. If you're here in a visa, call our office to get a consultation to see if you can become a permanent resident. If you're gonna apply for permanent resident, we tell people, and you need to do this, always do a California Department of Justice FBI check to see if you have anything in your history. The reason is, and I've been doing this for a long time, people always say, well, I don't have anything. And then when they get to the interview, they all of a sudden they see Jesus. Oh, I do have something. Okay. Oh, I do have an arrest. And then it's serious, right? So then it's too late, because then if you have a serious conviction, they'll deny it and then put you in removal proceedings. Okay. So please, what we tell people is, when you are going to apply for something, please do a Cal Department of Justice, an FBI check. The FBI check we get in 48 hours, maybe 24. And Cal DOJ, California Department of Justice check, that's for your state criminal history, we get within 2 weeks. So it's worth the investment. It's not that much, maybe $100 at most. And there's a place right down the street from our office you can get it done. Okay. And then if you have a criminal conviction, you will have to get a certified copy of your conviction record. So you're going to have to make the drive, hopefully it's local, to the court where it happened, to get a certified copy of your conviction document. And if you do have an immigration history, once again, we always tell people that if you've ever been stopped at the border, if you think you've been stopped at the border, if you don't remember, we always do a FOIA, that's called a Freedom of Information Act request, because we can get access to any kind of stop at the border. Again, that will affect your ability to immigrate in the future. Okay, so we tell people to do your homework first, so we can better serve you, because that way we have the information that we need to go forward with your case. Okay, the next one, have a plan. Okay, All right, this is the important plan I was talking about. It's real basic, but not so important. Okay, so families, this is what I told the lady who was selling fruit. I just told her kids to get all their documents in one place, all the birth certificates in one place. Okay, if you have emergency contacts, okay, put them all in one place. Okay. Now the schools are usually very good about this. Usually they have their own form, okay, that requires the parents to put down emergency contacts, and those are really, really good. So you need to work with your school. If they haven't done it yet, they need to work with their schools to get that form and completed because in case something happens to the parent, then the schools will know where to call. Okay, because the last thing you want is if the schools don't know where to call, you don't want the child to become a ward of the court, and that's happened in the past. Okay, so please, we want people to get their important documents and start putting your documents together. Start putting uh, your emergency contacts together especially with your kid's school. There is something called the power of attorney that you can complete. Our office does these. We had a whole day of Saturday where we did these. Basically, you can appoint someone legally to take custody of your children only for a certain amount of time in case something happens. Once again, if you use the format at school, that usually is good enough. But you can also do something called the power of attorney. You can also do a power of attorney like with your banks or you have your finances to say, well, this person now will take charge of my finances while I'm gone. Okay. Again, if your child if your child is born here and in case something happens to them, okay, and if they end up going back, please go to the Mexican consulate to know to do dual citizenship because if your children do have to go back, if they don't have dual citizenship proof, it's going to be hard for them to get enrolled in schools. That's for any country, okay? Any country. So you just have to be proactive now because these are times like unlike any other. So you want to be proactive and check out dual citizenship. And once again, the Mexican consulate here is very, very, very good at this. Okay, and they're busy, but just work with them, and they will get in contact with you. We have a very good relationship with them, by the way. Again, call your community-based organization. Call us. Okay, next one. Your children's future. Once again, you can do a power of attorney. Okay, we really recommend doing that. In addition to what you may have with the school, you can get a temporary guardianship under the law. Okay, you can get a temporary guardianship for a particular period of time, so that in case you can make it back if a person can't make it back to the States, then that guardianship is not forever. Okay, it's not forever. It's just for a temporary period of time. It's just enough time to protect your kids with a special immigrant juvenile petition kids, then those guardianships are forever because again, we have to prove that they cannot be reunited with one or both of their parents. So if they cannot reunite with both of their parents, they're going to get a full legal guardianship. Okay. Or if they come back and they have a parent here, then the parent wants to get sole legal custody of that child. Okay. 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 We're here to help. We give, I think Emilio talked about this. We give free legal consultations. We have a staff. I'm the only staff attorney here, but we have what's called accredited representative. Accredited representatives are people that have been trained in school. They've been trained by usually legal service providers, the Immigrant Legal Resource Center, clinic, which is the Catholic Legal Immigration Network. They always have trainings for people who want to become accredited. In other words, to become accredited, you have to put in so much time and get accredited with diplomas, okay? And then you must be supervised or at least have an attorney look over your accreditations. And so then when you get accredited representative like Emilio and like I think it was one, two, three other people, four other people in this office, they can represent people in immigration court. Okay. Okay, they can do that. Okay. What they cannot do is they can't go into state court, okay, or to federal court. Okay, but at least for immigration purposes, if you're going to get a family petition or a DACA petition or any kind of immigration benefit, even if I was in private practice, I would tell you go to a place that has non-accredited reps because usually they're unique to nonprofits. In other words, they can't work for private people. They can only work for nonprofits, and you can get help for free. Okay, and that's given these days. That's what you want to do. Okay. So we have accredited reps. We do, and they do all the applications. Again, the family petitions, the DACAs, the U visas, victims of violence, the domestic violence cases, UVs of victims of crime. We do basically all here at the office, and we do have accredited reps, and that's all done for free. Okay. We do community education, which I really like. We actually go out to the community and do know your rights. We also go out and do consultations for free. We go out to the high desert and to the Coachella Valley area. We work in conjunction with the Inland Coalition for Immigrant Justice on their consultations. So we have a good relationship, working relationship with them and also other service providers in the area. And we also have naturalization classes. I think they're Tuesday and Wednesday. Tuesday and Wednesday? I think Tuesday and Wednesday, yeah. And so we have a very good teacher named Juan. In fact, I can tell you that his classes are so tight and they love him so much that when they pass, they always have like a celebration, right? They have a dinner or something, right? So he does very good work. Okay, so we have like a full service nonprofit service provider here at the office. Okay, although I must say that we did lose our funding for removal cases, so right now we do have to charge. Okay, so that's the reality that we have to. I just want to be upfront with you, but we do good work. Okay, that's it. Now, am I off time or what? Oh, you want to support? Sorry, Cassandra. Yes, we do accept donations. Okay, there they are right there. Okay, so you can donate that way. In fact, I took a donation this morning for a client that I helped out. He gave me cash. I gave it to up front. Okay, so yeah, we do accept donations. We do need them. Okay, for removal of the fence. Okay, so please donate as much as you can. We do have funds, but we can always use more. And I think that's it. This we have, okay. Oh, we also have two programs here. We have what we call the active member of your community. We have our advocacy. Okay, there it is. United Voices for Advocacy Project. These are like people usually from our office that want to become civically engaged. Okay, like if they're taking the classes, we encourage them to become U.S. citizens, and then we encourage them to vote, but also go beyond voting. Just get involved in your community. You know, you can help us do know your rights, help us do clinics, and help us get involved with, voter registration campaigns because, that's we want people when we leave here, we don't want them just to get their papers. We want them to be involved and become U.S. citizens. Okay, that's or else we miss a golden opportunity. Okay, so our goal is to empower people, not just to provide services. Okay, so that's the United Voices Advocacy Project. You can talk to Cassandra about that. She does great work. She also does great work with this program. This is the Youth Integration Advancement. This is where for undocumented youth. For example, a lot of our unaccompanied undocumented minors, they're now involved with the Youth Integration Advancement Project. There, we try to give them more services so that they become engaged and enculturated to like their schools, social service providers. This last week, we actually had a soccer like a soccer training for them, just to get them involved. Okay. But again, it's getting them involved beyond the services that we offer here. Okay. If there's services they need at the school. Okay. And again, it's basically how to advance them to make sure they stay in school and hopefully get them on a path to college. Because here in the state of California, even if you're an undocumented student, and I think you all know this, if you have gone to a California high school for 3 years, if you graduate from a California high school and undocumented, you're eligible to pay in-state tuition and you are eligible for financial aid under the California DREAM Act. So most of these children are going to be, if they pursue higher education, they'll be eligible for those services. Okay, and scholarships. Okay. And that's how you follow us. Again, I want to thank Cassandra for doing all this because I don't know how to do this. That's how you follow us. And again, I want to thank Emilio Maya, our executive director, for making all this possible and for being a great executive director. And are there any questions? Oh, okay. One thing we're going to talk about. There was a question about nurses. Okay, there's a new law. I'll send it to Naida. Okay. There's also a new law that was signed by Governor Newsom called SB 81. Basically, what this law does is that it prohibits healthcare providers from granting access to non-public areas of a healthcare facility. Okay, it also prohibits them from providing access to patients' care to ICE, okay, or to Border Patrol without a valid warrant. Okay, it's a very good law. Okay, it basically answers the question that the person had about what should nurses do. Okay, in case the ICE comes, according to this law, they cannot get access to that stuff without a warrant. They cannot get access to patient areas without a warrant. Okay, but also it puts the responsibility on the health providers to provide a protocol to their offices. Okay, what to do. Okay, like schools here locally, when we work with the school districts, they have protocols. Like if something happens, then who's the person they're going to call? They're going to call the school lawyer. They're going to call the school principal. That's what they mean. Each of these health networks now has to have a protocol to implement this law. I'll send it to Naya to make sure she gets it. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. So yeah, that question was in regards to the employer as a whole. So in public settings like the hospitals or schools, just because we have seen a few cases where immigration authorities, for example, in Ontario, have gone to private or unrestricted areas
Yeah,
not accessible to the public. So the concern or inquiry came from someone who basically wanted to know as an employee who is a legal citizen, what can they do? And as an employer, what can they do to help their employees promote safety for them, but for also folks that may come into their work establishment?
yeah. So basically, well, again, that's the law says that the employer now has to come up with a proper protocol, but what they need to do right away is put up do not enter signs, private, like, where the patient areas is, where the patient records are. They can even probably put in front of their establishment. Okay. But I'll give you the law because it has all the questions on it. It's all the frequently asked questions. And it's a good law. So it was basically passed for that reason. Okay. Signed for that reason.
Thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
then for the rest of the public, we do have a Q&A feature. If you have a question for either Don Emilio or Mr. Russell, if you would like for them to answer here, please go ahead and do so at the moment.
Yeah.
Um, if not, we will go ahead and wrap up. We'll give it maybe like 5 minutes if that's okay. I do know there are a few folks from different fields joining us. So if you're in the nonprofit sector, community sector, school sector, please, this is a great time to ask for guidance and how to best support students or community members who may stop by your office.
Uh, Thank you again for joining the presentation. We really want to encourage, you to support our immigrant community that is really having a hard time. You can do it in different ways, by either donating to nonprofit organizations that are doing this in the community, by also participating in there's different rapid response networks throughout the state here in the Inland Empire area. Our rapid response is coordinated by the Inland Coalition for Immigrant Justice. There's a phone number that we actually provided in the presentation where they can be provided to community members for them to call when they see ICE in their communities, when they know about somebody being detained. They can always call, and that activates the rapid response network. And basically what we do is when there's a report that ICE is in a particular location, we had volunteers throughout the community that can go out and they can verify that that is actually happening, document, what is happening, try to provide resources to the families that are being affected, and we try to do that throughout the two counties. But that it is a volunteer-based effort, so we always encourage people that are interested in supporting to become members of the Rapid Response Network, because that's the only way that we're gonna be able to at least provide some limited assistance to our community members that are our families that are being affected by increased enforcement. And then the other thing that I think is important is to really make good use of your privilege of being a U.S. citizen, being white and not perceived as, a Mexican or and using that to document what is happening in our communities. There's so many abuses that are going on. ICE agents, they feel empowered and they feel like they can do anything. But I think there's a need to document what is happening because this administration is not gonna be forever. So we're gonna get to a point in which we're gonna be able to help some of these people accountable. But to do that, we need to document. We need to make sure that we get the information so that hopefully in a new administration, we some of these people that are abusing people that are abusing their human rights, they're gonna be held accountable and that they can be prosecuted. So, but that can only happen if you help us, if you participate, if you get involved, in supporting our immigrant community. And again, we are here to to help. We are always able and willing to do presentations in Spanish and English in different communities throughout the San Bernardino, Riverside, and Inyo County. So feel free to let us know if there's a need for a community presentation, and obviously to offer our resources, to support our community. We had been increasing our resources to try to provide services to as many people as possible, because we see that as a way to protect them when they file for an immigration benefit. At least if they get detained, they have something pending. They can hopefully protect them in case they get detained or arrested. And lastly, even though it may feel like there's little we can do, the Constitution hasn't changed. Immigration law hasn't changed. The only thing that changed is the interpretation that has been done by this administration. So even though people can still be racially profiled and detained, that doesn't mean that they can be removed. They can still challenge the detention when they're in removal proceedings. They can still, remain in the country if they challenge and the rest of the detention. But that can only happen if people are actually prepared and ready for it. And that's the message that we try to get out to our immigrant community and to our allies. That we need to be prepared. Enforcement is going to increase. With the resources the DHS got from the Big Beautiful Bill is going to increase. It's going to get a lot more worse in our community, and our community is relying on people like you, to get some protection support that is going to be to get otherwise. Resources to provide immigration legal services are very limited, especially in the Inland Empire. And, we have to rely on the support of people like Assemblymember Robert Garcia to get the funding from the state, to help us, help our community. So thank you for, joining us. And I don't know if there are any questions. I'll pass it back to Nadia. And thank you for inviting us.
Thank you for joining us. We do have one question that came up. It's, are churches a safe place during church services? You're mute.
Unfortunately, at the beginning of the year, there was places that were protected. Okay, they were called like safe haven places, like churches, healthcare centers, schools. But the Trump administration, as Emilio said, the difference is the implementation of the implementation and the policy that's being set forth by the Trump administration. Unfortunately, here in this area, we know for sure that there have been people who have been arrested on church grounds. We have not heard of people being arrested while mass is going on. That's different, okay? So that should be, they haven't done that yet, okay? But I would still be careful, because I think what has happened, they have had people who were arrested, I think, on church grounds, all right? And I know the bishop has basically told people, because of the fear, that if you want to skip mass on Sunday and do it by digitally, you can. And so for now, I haven't heard of people being picked up at mass. Now I haven't seen that yet.
But still, I think it's a good, organizing opportunity for people in their parishes, in their congregations to get involved. So what we advise is churches to be ready. They can always have a sign that, that says that it's private property,
Right.
even though it may be open to the public. They cannot go into the church unless they have a search warrant. And we also advise, people at the church to get organized, have people around. They can be, legal observers or people observing what is happening. Have security at the entrance. In case ICE Border Patrol show up, they can always be denied entrance unless they have a search warrant. So it's a good way to get community members involved, in their churches, in their congregations. Like Russell was saying, is not safe anymore. But still, I think we can help people feel at least safer if we participate and help our community members that are attending religious services.
Yeah, and the Pope and the bishops the U.S. Bishops Catholic Conference had just talked about what Emilio just said. Just churches should get involved in protecting their person. And what he said is the exact way to do it. Okay, and they're encouraging people to do just that.
And something that we offer is to help volunteers prepare for that. So if there's like a community group or a church that is interested, we can always do a presentation and how to get ready, how to prepare in case that would happen in your local church or your local organization.
Thank you so much. So I don't see any more questions coming in. So once again, thank you all. Thank you, Don Emilio, Mr. Russell, Cassandra, so much. Thank you for joining us and putting on this amazing presentation. A quick reminder to our guests, this recording will be put on the Assembly Members Know Your Rights website, which has our previous Know Your Rights workshop with Senator Reyes. There we also have resources to the Mexican consulate, the Guatemalan consulate, in case you or anyone that you may know needs to contact them. If you have, or if you need to contact any other person, please feel free to contact our office or the San Bernardino Community Service Center. Once again, on behalf of Assemblymember Robert Garcia, thank you so much for joining us, and he wants to reaffirm his commitment to protecting our undocumented community. He's ready to go back to Sacramento and continue advocating for students, families, and individuals. So just thank you all for joining us here tonight. And if you have any further questions, my email is on the Zoom invitation link. So please feel free to reach out. We're always happy to help. We do also have small Know Your Rights cards at our office that we are happy to distribute to folks around the community. Um, Emily, sorry, I just saw your question. Um, they said, is there a list of numbers to call to help? Like a one-sheet PDF or ways to get involved?
We
Yeah,
do have one that
go
we
ahead.
can provide. So what I guess what we're gonna do is we'll send it to you, Nadia, and then we can get it distributed. But yeah, we do have a list of organizations that provide access to legal services and also organizing efforts in the immigrant community or for people that want to support the immigrant community. So yeah, but we can get that out to you, and then you can distribute it to people that may need it.
Okay, that sounds perfect. So that information will all be on the follow-up email. Thank you so much once again, and I hope you all have a great night and please stay safe.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.